I have the pleasure to work with Sally. She's one of the smartest people I get to work with. She is now a core JavaScript maintainer. So like Drupal's JavaScript has been like stuck in 2013 for
a while, since 2013.
Yeah. She is now helping to bring it out and knows a lot about React and has been talking about bringing React into Drupal, and it's been really awesome. So welcome. Thank you for coming all the way from London, England.
Cool, thanks. Hi, sorry for the wait. I'm here to talk to you about all those things that Mike just mentioned. If you don't know who I am, I'm a senior technical architect at Lollabot, previously a developer, so that means I go in and go, what are you trying to build? For about 80% of the time, and then we go off and do it, and that's really great. I've been working on decoupled sites since around 2012. JavaScript in 2012 was pretty rough, so things are looking good these days, and I'm really happy that everyone in Drupal, well, everyone, lots of people in Drupal are really excited about building sites this way now. I recently became a Modernization Initiative lead at Drupal, which I'll talk about a bit, and I'm also the least useful core maintainer at Drupal, which I'll also talk about why. I'm also Slytherin, so you know, any fellow Slytherins want to come and hang out and like maybe do some crimes and break into cars, let me know. What we're going to cover in this, we're going to talk about why we might want all the JavaScript, so why is decoupling good, what's really hard, what have I really struggled with when I've built these sites, and then from what I've learned from that, like what I'm hoping that we can take into Drupal core based on that stuff, and then how we're going to do it and how all you awesome people can come and help us do it. So, has anyone done a decoupled site here? Like, hands? Yeah, a few. Anyone want to build a decoupled site? Yeah. Okay, that's good. So, why are projects starting to decouple? At work, we're seeing a lot of clients that are all coming to us now and saying, like, we want these decoupled sites, and that's really great. And we're like, so why do you want that? And like, I don't know. We just want this because everyone is talking about it. But there are very good reasons to do it. So, what we've seen lately is that Drupal doesn't inhabit like the huge sphere that it's used to. So it's still a very important piece, but it's not taking over everything. So it's just like one piece of the puzzle now in this whole like crazy micro architecture world of stuff. And as a CMS, it is really, really good. I'm going to compare some other CMSs in a bit, and you'll see why it's really good. But the way we build things on the web has maybe moved on a little bit since we, did all our Drupal theme layer stuff. So there's other techniques that are available now that we can use. JavaScript is pretty much everywhere. We don't necessarily expect that we have to do fallbacks for things that don't have JavaScript on. We can make really lightweight pages with it now. It's not that we have to like shove 5 megabytes of JavaScript at you to do things. So yeah, we can do all these fancy front ends, which are modern AF. I also realized I'd forgotten to switch out all these photos, so some nice, stock Keynote template plays there. Content strategists love Drupal so much. They can really get their hands on building very complex content models with relations, and all the field plugins we have are really great. We don't necessarily have the best field UI for people coming in and just being like, so what is this? But for people who've got a bit of experience, they can build these content models very, very quickly. They can like bang out prototypes, take it to a client. How do you like this? Okay, so there's a really good feedback cycle. You can get going with that. And because of that and some of the other features we have in Drupal now, like JSON API and REST API, we can do multi-channel really easily. So we can push stuff out to your phone, your fridge, all that great stuff. And if we're doing decouple, we can also do redesigns a little bit easier. So you've got your front end, it's very separated from your back end. It probably means you've done your content model slightly differently, and your whole site architecture than what you would do if you were doing like one big monolith Drupal install. And because you've tried to keep those separated, it's way easier to build a new front end on top of it. You probably are already building, well, maybe you're building multiple front ends already, and so when you're redesigning your like website, it just feels like you're building another one of these things. How many of you have like you've had your Drupal site and then you have to do a whole new redesign with a new theme? Yeah, Has it been like seamless, or have you had to start changing stuff on the back end?
You're talking about Drupal, right?
Yeah, yeah. But it always feels like you have to start fiddling with stuff on the back end, and then you're trying to support these two different models. It can get a bit difficult. So I think just forcing you to go into a slightly different architecture and think about those scenarios makes it a little easier down the line. So I can't talk to you about too many of the sites I've built because they're under NDA, but I can tell you about this one, lollobot.com, also known as my own personal hell. We started this site in 2015, and it was our first site where we were like, okay, we're going to build a fully decoupled site, back-ended by Drupal, and it's just going to live as a JavaScript application on its own. And 2015 JavaScript, my friends, is not the same as 2018 JavaScript, and it was painful. But, oh wait, my GIF's not going. There we go. But amazingly, it's actually really stood the test of time. So we're still running the same CMS. We used Drupal 7 back then because Drupal 8 wasn't quite ready with what we wanted to do. It doesn't have many modules, so we're not really like super motivated to upgrade it right now. So we've got a lot of longevity out of that. And right now we're in the process of upgrading our front end. So if you go on lollobot.com right now, there's actually 2 parallel apps that are running. So you might see some pages look a bit cooler than others, and in which case you're on a separate React app. And so we can slowly start to port some of that stuff over. And I think if we'd done that in Drupal, it would have been my personal hell version 2. So that's worked out really well for us. So I want to talk about some of the challenges that I had building this site, which if you're going to do your first decoupled, you're going to run into. It's like my top 3 personal hells. Routing, really tough because editors really want to control their routes, right? And so we're used to having path auto. So you just go in, you set tokens, or editor's going to override it, and that's all great. And then if you go and build a React application, you're like, okay, I'm going to have routing. It's going to be super cool. You go download React Router, and you look at Hello World, and it starts making you define all these routes. So it's like you have articles / an ID. You're like, okay, so how do I connect Drupal over to this idea over here? So what we did is you can set React Router to just have a star as its root, and so we're always going back to Drupal to try and figure out what should actually be at that URL. And there's a module I can't remember the name of, but JSON API now supports this, which is really helpful. Because you also don't want to have tons of requests, so you don't want to be like, hey Drupal, like what's at this URL? And it says it's this node ID. It's like, okay, so now I've got to go back and get all the data for that, and it comes back, and now I've got to go get the related data. So it's really nice if you can do that in one shot. Yes, there's also in Contenta we have this extra module called the snail module, because one other problem you can have with that is you say, okay, so now I've got path auto set up on the back end, and when I query my API, I can get all this data, and that's really great. But now you've got 2 routing systems that are trying to live in the same place. So your front end knows about all these URLs, but then when I query the API, it will probably know about all the URLs I have in Drupal as well. So if you're creating admin pages or listing pages, it's going to know about those things too. So I should have put a screenshot in this, but my favorite example is you can set admin as your URL alias for a node. And so now you've overridden your admin page, and then you can't have a URL on the front end that says /admin for whatever reason you might want. So you don't really want those things to live together. And the solution we have in Contenta is this tiny little module that every time you try and, you can still use path auto and URL aliases, it just disables it for nodes. So it doesn't actually work inside of Drupal anymore. So that's one nice solution for that. On lollobot.com, we stole the content model for this part from CNBC actually, because they really, really loved it. So every bit of content you make, you can add a slug, and then you can also add parents. And parents have slugs. Every single bit of content on the site can have slugs. And so you start building these trees of content, and so you can then figure out what the URLs are based on that. So because this has the parent of articles, then the full URL becomes articles / whatever. And that's kind of cool because you can go into the articles one and you'll be like, okay, we're going to move all of articles to /blog, and then you change it there and all the other ones change. Problem with that is that you also then have to write the code to manage all the redirects. So if we go in and change that, that's nice, it all gets reflected in the API, but then we also have to say like, okay, so we don't want to lose all our Google juice, so you're going to have to find those like million articles underneath and create redirects for every single one of those. If you go on lullabot.com, this is why the Drupalize Me the Lullabot podcast is still under the URL of Drupalize Me because we haven't fixed that yet. So there's lots of things that Drupal gives you for free you're not going to get with your decoupled site, so don't underestimate how much effort you might have to put into doing that. Okay. Content editing discovery can be quite hard. So has anyone used the idea of like touts or promos on their site with like, little blocks of content that might just kind of go in places, but they're not necessarily their own node, but we still need to manage them somehow because people want to edit stuff, funnily enough. So if you're looking at these two separate sites, it's kind of hard for content editors to know, like, where do I go in my backend in order to edit this thing? Like maybe it's not labeled very well, or there's like tons of blocks everywhere and you just don't know what you're looking for. So one quite simple solution we had for this is we pass the node ID down as a data attribute. So if you're logged into the CMS and you go on this site and you press the E key on your keyboard, it pops up with like a little edit corner in all of our blocks and then takes you off to the CMS and you can edit it there. So we don't ever really want to try and do inline editing or anything like that, because if you're doing multi-channel publishing, it doesn't work out so well, but at least this can like give people hints so they can go in and edit where they need to quite easily. And then the last major hurdle for us was content preview. Turns out it's kind of nice if you can see what you're about to publish before you actually publish it. We ended up with two content preview systems. One is a static content preview system, and the other is a live preview, which I'll show you a demo of. With the static one, and this is going to be this is really hard because you don't want your users to be able to access stuff in your API that's not necessarily published yet. So especially if you're a news site, you don't really want people to just like find your API and be like, oh, I wonder if they're going to publish in an hour or whatever. So you need to have some kind of separate database for that content that's secured, or you need to have it can be in one API, but then you need to have authentications and roles going on with that API. JSON API supports OAuth, so this became a lot easier when that came out, and JSON API is going to go into core soon, so hopefully that will make everyone's lives a bit easier. So this is our static preview system. When you go onto the workflow tab, you get these preview links over here, and it will load up the front end, and it starts parsing in UUIDs into the URL. And so the front end, once you've got these architectures separated, it's actually kind of easy to do preview because the front end just has to know to start swapping particular bits of content out. So we pass in these extra bits of content, and it knows every time it sees content X, it should actually swap it with content Y. So you can pass in a big blob of stuff, and it will not only replace like the main bit of content that you're looking at, you could also like swap out things that are in this on the side and everything. And that's really nice as well because you actually have a shareable URL that you can send to someone and be like, hey, can you review my article? What do you think about that? And then the second kind of preview system we have is more for when you're writing stuff and you want to see how it's going. So I'll take a sip of water, I'll show you my demo video. So yeah, this is kind of cool. It's interesting because it's not ever pushing stuff into an API. They're actually communicating through local storage, so you don't have to keep saving and doing stuff like that. It's very quick. Yeah, it's cool. It supports images. You can do all the WYSIWYG stuff. You can change layouts, all that kind of stuff.
Was the decision made to do that like on the back end versus like in place editing, right, on what you're looking
So in-place editing, I don't like in-place editing. I think if you're publishing to many devices, which you are, even if it's just one website, because it's going to appear in so many places, it gives you the illusion that like it's going to look like that when it doesn't. And also, I think it completely removes you from the metadata that might be associated with your content. You should come to the Decoupled Summit at Nashville, because Jeff Eaton's going to wave his arms around and talk about that kind of stuff. Yeah, does anyone else have thoughts on that? I know it's like quite a...
I think it's, so like, when it comes to like e-commerce, inline editing is horrible in my opinion, because the multi-channel. People, they're going to be sending their store data to Amazon, to Google. I mean, Pinterest supports products now. Like, your data is going to be represented in multiple ways. So inline editing is I think, a good selling point for some initial client. Like, people see it as like I see it as like a vanity metric. Like, it looks great, but like when you get to like the harder problems later on,
Yeah.
it creates more problems than the time you invest in it.
Yeah. Cool. I know other people have comments. I'm just going to wait to the end because we're like really close on time. Sorry.
You can go over.
Oh, I can. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Daniel?
Right, so I think inline editing for like sites you build with WordPress is exactly the thing you need, because you just build like a simple site. But the strength of Drupal is not that you can like write a big HTML block, but rather that you have this metadata and you have your content model and you can design all these like crazy hierarchies and stuff. And that's where you no longer are able to actually like use inline editing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not like building Joe's flower shop here. But then, you know, you get into the philosophical discussion of like, well, is Drupal meant for that kind of thing, or is it for like everything? And so let's not get into that now. Come on, there we go. Okay, so let's also see what like our frenemies are up to. WordPress released Calypso a while ago. It's like a React application. When you go on WordPress.com, you can edit like multiple sites at the same time. It's fast, it's cool, it's shiny. But the thing to remember about Calypso is it has like a really limited API. Like, you're not doing much on WordPress. You're making nodes and editing nodes essentially. So we could do that like right now. And obviously it would be better because we're so much cooler. But like WordPress doesn't support well, it could with plugins, but it doesn't support as well, in my opinion, multilingual workflows, like all those complicated things that editors of big sites need. So yeah, it just doesn't have that. So even though our admin theme might seem a bit old in technology right now, it doesn't mean it's worse. Keystone is another one I've looked at and has been quite an inspiration to me when thinking about this stuff. They're really similar to Drupal in the sense that it has like a field API and content types and all that stuff, but it's really manual. So when you create your content types, you're literally popping open a text editor and being like, okay, now I have to try and format this file to be all the fields that I want. And that's nice, but if you're trying to spec out content models, for me, I need like a visual thing. So I don't like that so much. I do like that you can just like grab parts of the CMS packages and bring it into your node files or whatever you're writing. So that's kind of cool. Django CMS is another really popular one. They have a REST API plugin. It's like really low activity. Again, like Calypso, it's not doing as much as we're trying to achieve. And there's like a bunch of proprietary ones as well. Here's a big table. They're all getting like VC money thrown at them everywhere. Contentful is like a particularly popular one amongst JavaScript developers. Again, like keep in mind they're just not trying to achieve a lot of the same things that we are. So we're still cool. Everything's okay. At Drupalcon Vienna, we started this JavaScript Modernization Initiative with Nasril and Angie and myself and a bunch of other people who were there. We hang out in this JavaScript channel in Drupal, so come and chat with us. It's a bit of a bad name actually, because we chose React in this meeting, but really it's not about the technology we use to build these things. What we want to do is make our admin interfaces better, and we want to make it so that not only like 3 people in the entire world understand our JavaScript code base. So you could come in and like contribute your React components and everything, and we want things to be familiar. So after Vienna, we decided we were going to build this prototype into Drupal, and we built the DB log page as a React component, and that was pretty cool. You can see it on our GitHub. But after doing that, to me at least, it became kind of clear that we didn't want to start embedding like these single page applications just all over the admin interface as like separate things, because that's not super useful. Like you could build an admin theme with that now. It's like the progressively decoupled thing that a lot of people talk about. But it means like every time you go to an admin page, it would have to load and boot up React and do that thing, and things aren't necessarily shared together very well. So here's like my wish list for how I hope this initiative pans out. I really would love if the thing that we build is familiar to JavaScript developers. So tons of people are learning JavaScript now. It is mind-blowing. Like every time we go to a meetup in London, it's just like a sea of people. And I'm always amazed like how quickly people are picking this stuff up. As like people who've never coded, like in there straight away. It's really great. So I would love it if someone who is in the JavaScript community, they don't really know Drupal, they know they need a CMS. It's funny, if you go to like Node conferences, they're always like, CMSs, we don't really care about that stuff. But at some point, it's like, you are going to need a CMS. So we're here waiting. I want them to turn up and be like, okay, I want to do stuff on the admin interface, so I'll do what I do everywhere else. I go to the GitHub, I clone it, npm install, and there it is. So that's kind of important to me. We also need to have something achievable. So the idea that we could just like go off and build this decoupled admin theme for 2 years and come back and go, here you go, like isn't really doable. Because as Angie pointed out to me yesterday, like they never work out so well. Like even when you do client projects, like if you just went off for like, all right, see you in a couple of years, that's not going to pan out. So something we want to do is try and have this idea of parallel apps, I guess, so we can start slowly replacing things in the admin theme with like our new shiny stuff. So for a while, it's probably going to like flip between them as you move around. And some things like maybe we'll never port over. I don't know if it's worth it. Like we were talking yesterday about the Views API, sorry, the Views UI. It's already like really interactive. It might not be worth putting in all the effort to port it over for it to not be much better. But maybe from a maintenance point of view, it might work out that way, so we'll see. We really want to have a testing infrastructure so that you can write JavaScript tests in JavaScript instead of having to learn PHP in order to write JavaScript. So right now, we're really, really close to having Nightwatch in Drupal core. Nightwatch allows you to do functional tests, so it's all about like load Chrome in the background and click around the browser. There's one blocking issue left, I think, which is Daniel's, and that's we need a way to automatically install Drupal so it's set up. So if you want to review that issue, then that will make us really happy. But that's really, really close. We also would really love to rely on the data we already have. So right now, as a module author, you have a bunch of settings in your module, and you've probably, well, maybe you're using the config entity system, and so you've already told us lots of things about your configuration. And then once you've done that, then you have to go off and write a separate form and tell us the same things about your configuration again, that like, this is a multiple choice thing, or like, this is a text field or a number or whatever. So what would be really cool is if we could reuse that information you've already given us to auto-generate these forms on the front end. So this is something Keystone.js does. It takes your field and content type definitions and it just auto-generates all these forms in React for you, which is very cool. We don't want to limit you to the point where like you can't decide like if you want radios or select boxes. So we need to kind of augment that internal API slightly so you can add display information to it or a few other things. There's also a few weird things that we don't have internal, well, or any kind of API for. So a really good one that Daniel pointed out yesterday was on the permissions page. Although all the permissions are stored in config entities, the only things that are stored is what you've enabled, whereas the entire list of things, we don't really know how to get that out. So we need to start creating all these missing APIs for the things we don't have, and then we can start building these admin themes on top. So whilst we're doing that, we're hoping we're also just like benefiting the API First initiative and all that ecosystem as well. And then the other thing I would love to do is if we could develop this on GitHub, just because JavaScript people are there. It's where they all hang out. It's pretty cool. Definitely has its problems. Like its issue tracker isn't as good as Drupal.org. Obviously we can't be like, oh, we need this thing, so we need to go in and customize it. But in my opinion, at least, like the benefits of being on there where everyone is would outweigh those drawbacks. And other open source projects have come up with a few solutions for that as well. So there's robots that give you access to pull requests. There's issue templates and file ownerships, and you can have a robot to say like, hey, can you sign our contributor license agreement when you make a pull request, or like, hey, you need to look at our code of conduct before you can do stuff. So there is a lot of really nice features on there. We can't completely move away from Drupal.org because, you know, it's the admin UI. Like, we can't just be like, see ya, and we're just an external dependency. Drupal has lots of processes and gates in place. So we still need to adhere to all of those, and we still need to liaise with like the product owners and all those people on Drupal.org. But we're hoping we can have like all the nerdy coding bits on GitHub. And I believe the Layout Initiative did something very similar to that. So they would go off and work on GitHub, and when they were at a good stopping point, they'd come over to Drupal.org and be like, hey, what do you think of this? Here's our patch, all that stuff. Yeah. So if you would like to get involved, come and join us in the JavaScript channel in Drupal Slack. We have a really weird peace wave thing going around. I don't know if that. We have meetings in Slack every Monday at 12:30 Eastern. They're text only, so they're really accessible. If you just want to come and lurk, that would be great. The first item is always, hey, if you're here, like, let us know who you are. So it's always really nice to know who's interested. Even if you don't feel like you want to participate yet, then that is fine. We have our GitHub organization, which is JS Drupal, or you can follow us on Twitter. And we're also going to have a BOF at DrupalCon Nashville. So we want to come and hear what you think of all our silly plans. I think that's it. Yeah, thank you. If you have any questions, please let me know. Yes.
So that preview thing that you did with local storage, is that a module in Drupal that loads? How does that work, please?
Well, it doesn't need to use Drupal, so it's like serializing the form as you type, and so we have functions in Drupal because in Drupal 7 the API options aren't so good, and so we flatten lots of our documents, so we push it out to CouchDB. Which is a flat file document storage thing, and it has a REST API. It's really great. So we have lots of functions in our custom Drupal modules that knows how to turn a Drupal node into a bit of JSON, which you already have in Drupal if you're in 8 because you've got JSON API. So as we're writing things on that form, it's taking all of that data and squashing it into a JSON object, and then we're pushing it out to the front end. And so the front end, when the live preview is on, it's just like, hey, got any new data? Got any new data? And it's just updating it as it goes. There's our secret sauce. Any other questions? Yeah.
What impact will this have on form render arrays? Does it just kind of obviate some of the need for our renderer? I mean, I know there's been talk about what to do about that soup, and is this addressing that at all?
I hope so.
Okay.
Like, I hope you'd never have to use it again and it would go away. I don't know. I guess it depends how the community feels about this when we start building it. It's nice that we can auto-generate stuff, but we also need to let people customize things too. I don't want to force people into a situation where they're like really into PHP and they're building their modules and then they feel like, oh, now I have to go and learn React and JavaScript in order just to make my form, and I want to do a small form alter and I have to do all this stuff. So we need to figure that out. I don't know is the answer. I hope so.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
So would the Monday meetings be a good time to jump in to help try to get JSON API in the core?
No.
No? Or
If you want to go to those, there's API
is
First
that the
Initiative.
API First Initiative?
No, yes, that's that initiative. And they also meet on Mondays, like 2 hours before, 2.5 hours before.
I can figure it out.
Yeah. I
Because-
mean, if you pop in the JavaScript channel and ask,
Yeah.
someone will tell you, because our goals are very closely aligned. Or do they have an API First channel? Does anyone know?
I was just looking that up. There's an API channel, but not an API first one.
Yeah. I think they
It's
just
like
posted
they
in
do
the...
them on, so there's a Drupal 8 core calendar that you can subscribe to,
Ah.
and the invite isn't there, and it looks like they do them on Google Hangouts on air probably, so they must be recorded somewhere.
I know. I think they get posted in the Contented channel.
Yeah, I know I can find them.
Yeah.
There's
Hey.
also,
Sorry.
there's also the decoupled channel.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a decoupled channel. I think one other thing that I sort of forgot to talk about is why I labeled myself as like the least useful core maintainer is that I find our current JavaScript code base really hard. And so I've come in and tried to review these issues, and it's so tightly coupled into like strange PHP systems that we have that even though my JavaScript skills are very strong, it's really tough for me to figure out what's going on. And so I really want to change that situation, because right now there's just like there's like a handful of people that can work on these issues with our code base. So for me, it's really important that we can like drag ourselves into the modern age.
Are you on ES5 or are you on using ES6 for JavaScript code base?
So in core right now we have, oh gosh.
Or are you planning on like migrating up to like the
Pardon?
new ES? Are you working on like going up to ES6?
So that's an interesting question, because we have been working on that. So in Drupal right now, you'll notice for all the JavaScript files there's .es6 versions of them. If you download core. So if you work on them, you need to locally, if you're working on a patch, build it, transpile it with Babel into these ES5 versions, because we don't have a build step with Drupal. And that's like another issue, like maybe we do need to have a build step somewhere. So that is happening, like there's lots of stuff upgrading it to ES6, and Matt Grill in particular is trying to get everything like up to the Airbnb coding standards for ES6. I'm not convinced it's worth the effort at this point, because we're hoping to do all of this stuff, and our current JavaScript code base isn't active. Like there's not lots of people wanting to work on it. So yeah, yes, but maybe we won't soon.
But if you are passionate about that,
Yeah.
go to meetings every Monday.
Yeah, we always post issues for like the things that we're working on with the current code base in the meeting. So if you're able to come in and review stuff, it's always like really highly appreciated. So we'll throw loads of karma at you, and that will be great. Any other? Yeah.
You mentioned poo-pooing on in-place editing. What about for things like layout and the Layout Builder initiative? Is this? It seems like again like there might be some overlap here in terms of admin interfaces and that initiative. So, do you know what the interaction there will be?
So I don't know. I know that like it would be really cool if we could build these better interfaces for Drupal with stuff like React, because it's easier. I know that the people that worked on like settings tray, for example, had a really hard time working on that stuff within Drupal's JavaScript ecosystem. So because like if you want to have all these cool modern interfaces, you need to use JavaScript, and there's not really any way around it. So hopefully when we've done this, it means you'll be able to build a cooler interface for Layout Builder easier, and hopefully it'll be more maintainable. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
So building on that ES5, ES6 discussion, was there any discussion of potentially TypeScript?
No, not really. I liked it, it's nice. I think one of the factors that went into why we went with React, I mean, one, it was just so people would stop yelling at us about choosing a framework, because everyone has an opinion about which framework they've liked. It's a really easy thing to have an opinion about, because you'd be like, I used Vue, I like Vue, I used React, sure. So partly it was just let's just make that decision and put that aside. And also just a lot of people working on this are really familiar with React. We just know it well. And also, if you look at the JavaScript, what was that, survey that they put out every year, React is by far and away the most popular. So that also went into that decision. So yeah, TypeScript's super cool. There's just so much to choose from. You just got to pick something.
Are you still receiving a lot of blowback about the idea? Because I just remember there's a huge reactionary effort about, we're going to modernize JavaScript, we're going to use React, we're going to decouple. Is there still that animosity in the community, do you feel? At least that's how it seemed coming out, and I think it was unwarranted. This is the way the web works now.
Yeah, there's some angry people.
Is there?
They're still posting in that issue about how angry they are.
I want to, as a co-maintainer of Drupal Commerce, I want to see how we can fix that, because when we did our research, if we don't have a modern JavaScript API, we have no market share. We cannot go to people and say we're better than Shopify, Magento, or whatever, because we have a cart that's static and doesn't interact.
Yeah.
We can't build API calls. We're building custom API calls right now for a demo theme.
Oh wow.
To do cart add-in, add-in to subtracting from your quantity. Yeah. So if we get JSON API in core, if we get React, we can build an extremely beautiful e-commerce experience. So if there is that animosity, I want to try to figure out how we can use our community, our subset, to tell people, look, this is what we can do. Send them to some of our clients, some of the sites people have built, look at all this JavaScript. This is why it's a cool shopping experience. This is why we need to have modern JavaScript in the core. So I know that's what I want.
Will you write a Drupal post about that?
I will. I want to go
do.
all in. I know Boyan's all about this too.
Yeah,
we are just itching for modern JavaScript.
I think we just need people. People are going to be. There's some people who are going to be angry, whatever we do, and you can't please everyone, and so I know. So if you're excited about this, feel free to be excited. Write blog posts, come on Twitter, be positive, be nice.
Be gracious.
Yeah, just ignore all the hating people. I mean, obviously you don't want to ignore the community, because we need to build something to serve them, but if people are being just overly hostile, yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking for some advice. In the Twin Cities Drupal community, we have a strong, stable group, but I see the same faces. We're 15, 20 people. I like going to the JavaScript meetup because there's a lot. They have 50 to 70 people. It's dynamic. There's a lot of young people. I feel sort of new programmers are coming in there. And I'd like to figure out how to reach out. Mm-hmm. And offer to do a presentation at a JavaScript meetup about Drupal. I liked your comment earlier about that eventually they're going to need a CMS. We're waiting. What kind of message would it be helpful for us to take, say, to the JavaScript meetup?
Yeah, it's that you can think of Drupal as a service, almost like a black box. JavaScript developers love APIs. So hey, if you need a CMS, we've got this great API. Here's how you can use it. Don't get into all the PHP stuff. If there's one thing I love about Contentor is the one command install. So it's in an environment which is really familiar to people, because it's just on a command line. You go in, you type one command, and then Drupal pops up, and it's got all the APIs. So you don't even have to think about running all that stuff. It's running SQLite and PHP's own built-in web server, so you don't have to set up a stack or whatever that stuff. So if you could make it easy, a service and that, and I'd also talk about how all the cloud platforms are good, but you can't use them everywhere. So like some of our clients are insurance companies, like they have to own their own data. They can't put all this stuff in the cloud, and there's tons of places that will need that. So yeah, Drupal is an important piece of the puzzle still. We had this client, it's like a huge media client we've had for ages, and they had this Drupal 7 site, and it had like a ton of modules, and it was getting really slow. And so they're like, screw this, we're getting rid of Drupal. They went through like every other CMS on the planet. And now they've come back to Drupal, and they're like, oh yeah, please. Yeah.
Well, it's always the story is greener on the other side of the road, but once you get there, it's not.
Yeah, like we might not be using the most modern programming language or whatever, but it doesn't really matter because our value is in all these like great editorial features and stuff we have, and the community and all the knowledge that we have around managing content. Even though lots of JavaScript developers might think managing content is boring, we all think it's really awesome, and so they will need us at some point. Yes.
Going back to the those who are angry about the React choice, maybe a message that could be kind of put out there is that choosing one and going with it had to be done. And you're going to be finding those holes, like you mentioned, the list of permissions. You're going to find holes like that you fill now in the API. And that means it's not just React that benefits from that. You know, if somebody really loves Vue, it's open source. They can go and build Vue, and now because of this initiative, a lot of the holes are filled that can allow for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's nice if we could all rally around one thing, so we can all put our effort into one thing. But you're totally right. Like, if you want to go and build your Vue platform on Drupal, like, feel free. That is fine. They're going to be angry because it's not official, but like, I mean, it's Drupal. What is?
All the things are, yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to kick me off?
You got 5 minutes till
You're not my dad.
And you did tweet from my phone.
No, I didn't. Did you know that Mike supports the Seminoles? You can look on his Twitter account. Actually, I didn't touch your phone. Yeah. Mike came to Drupalcamp Spain with me, and I kept tweeting things about the Seminoles from his phone, and so he'd be like, how are you doing this? And he'd be like changing every single one of his passwords, all his phone passwords, everything, getting annoyed, and then eventually he's like, how are you doing this? I'm like, dude, you keep leaving your phone unlocked on the table. Like, cool. I think we've got no more questions. But yeah, like if you want to nerd out about this stuff, I love talking about it. But definitely come to that meeting and lurk, participate, all the things you want to do. It'd be great to see. Thank you.